All right, welcome everyone. This is a very special event that we're doing here today for the next hour. We've been very blessed with an extremely special guest, a very cherished friend of mine, Mr. Brian Proctor. So let's give Brian a big round of applause. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks,
Brian
Peg.
is just releasing his wonderful book, My Father Knew the Secret. There we go. How many of you already have a copy of My Father Knew the Secret? Let's go to a view where we can see the
Wow,
gallery.
look at that.
Yeah, hold it up. Oh, isn't that great?
Hey, that's
Can someone
wonderful.
snap a picture, Vladdy? Would you be able to snap a picture for us so that we can all see it? If you have Brian's book, please hold it up. Brian, can you hold it up as
There
well,
we
please?
go.
There we go. All right, we're going to get a picture of that, and we'll be able to post that online. Not surprised that many people already have your book, Brian, because it's, as you very kindly did, you let everyone know that it was available once it was out there and online and shipping. And as we all know, today is your father's birthday. So it was on July 5th in 1934 that the world was blessed with an incredible being who used to say, "I'm not from here," Bob Proctor. I remember when we were at the Beverly Hills Hotel on a Sunday morning, and it was right after Cynthia Kersey's Unstoppable Black Tie event. And your dad and I are sitting in the lobby, and someone came up to him and said, Bob, you really do need to slow down. And he had that look on his face that sometimes was a challenge to read, but you get almost like the dog that tilts their head, not understanding what the person is saying. And he said, like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you're getting older, and usually people at your age, they slow down. And he said, I'm not from here. I'm not from here. So Brian, let's talk about your dad. What I love about your book, and I'm certain you're hearing this from so many people, is it really does give people another view inside who Bob Proctor really was. And so tell me why you decided to write this book in the first place. What inspired you to get on with the work?
Well, you know what, Peg, thanks very much. I have to say the feedback I've been getting and the messages have just been amazing. It's like been very, very heartwarming. This book, as you know, it's been 4 years really in the making. I probably started writing this around 4 years ago. And Dad knew I was writing the book. How it came to be was Corey and I, my wife, we were talking, and I said, I should write a book. And I said, but I'm not quite sure what to write about. I had some different ideas. And Corey just looked at me and she says, well, Brian, you should just write about the lessons you learned from your dad. Like every seminar I'm at, the first thing I'm always asked is, what's it like having Bob Proctor as a father? And so I was like, wow, you know what? That kind of makes sense. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine how many times I've been asked that question. So I started writing it, and I started writing about all the lessons I learned from Bob Proctor as a father, from my point of view, right from back when I was a little boy up until 60 years old when he passed. And it was a lot of fun. Dad knew I was writing the book, and there was many mornings. For you, those of you that don't know, my father and I were very, very close. We weren't just father and son; we were like best friends. I mean, we talked all the time, and so I would start to tell him what I was writing, and he would, he'd listen and he loved it, and then he'd give me some different perspectives. He would share with me what he thought of something back when it happened, 50 years ago, whatever that may be. And it really helped me to kind of get a little more concise with a lot of the stories and a lot of the things. And I always thought I would have this book out when he was alive and he'd get to enjoy it. The funny thing was, and I wrote this in the book, Dad always said to me, he says, Brian, just take your time with it. Take your time. Write from the heart, make it right, and it'll be finished whenever it's supposed to be finished. Well, it didn't get finished until after he was gone. And I often think back that I think he knew he wasn't going to be here when the book came out, but that's okay. He didn't know what the title was going to be. However, I do believe that he inspired the title. It came to me in the middle of the night. I was actually dreaming about Dad. And then I woke up and I had this clarity around the title that I should call it My Father Knew the Secret. And so I actually wrote it down so that, it was hard coded. And it felt right. I just knew that that was the right title for the book. So that's kind of how the title came to be. But it took 4 years. And the last year has been probably the most intense around it. As you know, Peg, I sent you an early version, which was probably half of what the book is now. My wife, Corey, really helped edit the book and I think add color to the book. She brought a little more out of the story. She would ask me questions and say, hey, how about if you write about this, or can you add more to this? And she really helped make the book a much better version to what it is today. So that's kind of how it really came to be. And as you know, Peg, I was planning the big launch was going to be today, Dad's birthday. I thought what an appropriate time to launch the book. And the gods at Amazon made it available a lot earlier. It was incredible how quickly it uploaded and what a life this book has taken on. I'm sure some of you, it's the comments I've gotten and people posting pictures holding the book has just been incredible. So I will say, anybody that wants to take a picture with the book, if you want to tag me on social media, man, I'm happy to repost it. That has just really helped take a life on of its own. And my hope is that today, if you don't have a copy of the book, please go and get a copy. I know in my heart you're going to love it. And that's because this book is not about me. It's about my father. And it's a different perspective of Dad than what you all know him of as the speaker out there. Anyway, I probably went on a little bit about it, but that's kind of where it all came to be, Peg.
I love it. I have goosebumps as you're talking about that. The title came to you in a dream, and that is one way that your father communicates is through dreams. He comes to me in dreams, and of course, as you know, I wrote Savvy Wisdom from Beyond, and that's how he was communicating with me, and that's how Savvy communicates with Sophie. So that's amazing. By the way, you mentioned tag. And for everyone listening, Brian mentioned tag him on social media. I tagged your nephew this morning. Your nephew is Bob Proctor.
That's right. Yeah.
It wasn't until later that I realized that I had tagged your nephew and not you. And I was about to go into a class, so I had to untag, but I never re-tagged you this morning. So just so everyone knows, there is another Bob Proctor out there in the world. It happens to be Raymond's son, who is your nephew.
That's right.
And did he name him after you?
He named him after me. Yeah. It was quite the compliment. Little Brian, we call him Little Brian, although I think he's bigger than me now. He got married just a few weeks ago, so I was up in Toronto to enjoy that. But yeah, I know I can tell you my Instagram is Bob Proctor Official. Easy to find. Yeah.
For sure. All right. And are you on Facebook?
I am on Facebook.
Okay, good. All right. So that's a great way to definitely be tagged. All right. Good to know. One of the questions that I had for you is what are the responses that you're getting from readers? What have people been saying about the impact the book has had on their life?
Well, I think, it's just there's so many, Peg. It's almost overwhelming, but in a really good way. I think people are getting to see a side of my father that they didn't know, which is really nice. And that was my intent with this. And the way we structured the book, wrote it in such a way that it's really all stories of how Dad was with me and what I learned from him. And then after the story, we kind of have consider points that help you to see the lesson in the story and how you can apply it in your life. And so that the feedback I'm getting from people is just, how special a way that they're seeing Dad my father in a way that they hadn't seen before. Certainly some lessons that they've never heard him talk about in the seminars before, which is kind of fun. And really how it's just touched them, how it's changed the way they've looked at not only my father, but their own life and how they can apply it in their life. So I'm getting some great responses that way, which is just, it's been wonderful. It's been really, really wonderful.
I love that. You know, before we started the call today, I got on early, and we have one of our guests today is Sherry Dunn, who wrote this book. We'll do a
Oh,
little Maddie and Jasmine. And Sherry was telling me the other day that she loved the MMFI
right.
when you shared that. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the chapters in the book, my father was was all about what he liked to call the impression of increase. And that is leaving everybody you come in contact with feeling better because they came in contact with you that day. And for those of you that haven't heard the story, I was in the late 80s, I got into real estate. I had worked for Dad when I was late teens and early 20s, and I had to get out and kind of do my own thing, make my own mark, that I knew I could make it in the world without my father. And so I got into real estate sales in Toronto, and I did very, very well. I applied everything that Dad had taught me to real estate, and I was a huge success in real estate. I was actually in the top 100 for a international real estate firm in sales. So, and that was right out of the get-go. Well, I was in a seminar in Palm Desert, right outside of Palm Springs, with a fellow by the name of Brian Ferry. He was putting on this event, and he had 2,000 agents in the audience, and we were all there just to learn from him. And I was sitting right in the front row. Well, little did I know, Mike asked me to come up on stage. And I stood on stage, and he looked at me and he started explaining about, who my father was. And he said, it's no surprise that Brian is doing so well in real estate. And then he asked me, he said, would you share with the audience why you are so successful? And I stood there and I thought for a minute, oh God, what can I say exactly? And then it hit me. It took me back to grade 4. I think I was 9 years old. And we had just moved to Chicago. Dad always talks about the home on Maplewood Lane in Glenview, Illinois. The famous den where he came up with the idea that he was going to teach this material around the world. Well, I remember sitting in that den with Dad, and I was just about to start grade 4. And I said to him, I said, Dad, I'm going to be that new kid in school again. I just hate that. What can I do? How can I make things better? I'd already been in like 3 different schools by the time I was in grade 4. So I was always that new kid. And he sat me down and he just said, he says, Brian, this is what you do. Just put MMFI across the forehead of anybody you're talking to. And I kind of looked at him, what does that mean? And he says, it stands for make me feel important. If you can make the person you're talking to feel special or feel important, he says, you'll get on in this world. He says, you don't need to talk about yourself. You just take a genuine interest in the other person, whether it be a compliment, just being present and being engaged in a conversation with them and be truly interested in the person you're standing in front of. And he says, if you can make everybody you come in contact with feel better because they were in contact with you that day, he says your life, you'll make friends really easily. And he says your life will be so much easier. Well, when I stood on stage at that real estate event that day, that's what I talked about. And I said, I make it my mission to make everybody I'm in contact with, everybody I'm dealing with feel really special. I didn't realize until I was standing on that stage that that's what I was doing, but that kind of anchored in consciously what I was doing. And I made it my mission from that point on that I would do it consciously. And I used to get referrals like crazy because everybody loved dealing with me. And so, what I would suggest to everybody here, and that it's a chapter in the book, and I had a lot of fun writing this one, is what can you do to make everybody you come in contact with feel better because they met you that day? Boy, if you can do that, your business, your world, your personal, everything will be so much better just because of that. So that's the MMFI story. It's a good one.
That's a great one. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. It was nice of Sherry to, highlight that was one of the big takeaways. She actually flipped through your book before our call started to show me all the highlighting and dog ears and all the notes. There she is right up in their top corner. She really got a lot out of it. Now, when so many things are coming to my mind, and I'm seeing some of the comments in the right-hand side. By the way, guys, if you do have a question for Brian, you can certainly type it in the chat box, and I'll be I'll be sure to do my best to ask him any of the questions. You mentioned about real estate. When you first got into real estate, there were two things that your father had suggested to you because you're just entering a new industry. This was unfamiliar territory for you. And there were two things that he suggested, not only the MMFI stuff, but do you remember what they were? Do you remember what it was that you wrote about in the book?
So the two things, I'm sure this is what I wrote about. It was to surround yourself with successful people. That was the number one thing. He was always about who you surround yourself with, you become. So make sure they're good. Make sure they're people that are productive, that are really doing something in the world. That was one of the big things. And, the other big thing was just, what can you do today to make a deal happen today? That was a big part of it. And it doesn't matter what business we're in, if we live in the present moment and what can we do right now to be more effective and better at it, we'll do great. And part of the deal was, I guess the second tip was he taught me to act as if.
Yes.
He told me to act as if I am the most successful real estate agent in all of Toronto. And that's what I did. And I remember my very first clients, they would have never known that they were my first clients because I treated them like I was already this crazy successful real estate agent. And I took care of my clients. And that was a big thing. He says, you just act as if, and you will become. And that was really kind of the second big thing. And that's what I did. And both of those things worked out well. I only surrounded myself with successful people. The ones that weren't successful, that were always saying how bad the market was or how bad this was, man, I would just avoid them like the plague. And I just surrounded myself with good people. And I acted as if until I became that person. And it worked.
That's so good. I love in the book that you also wrote that like today is your dad's birthday and that you would call him and sing to him because he did that with everybody. I mean, He called me on my birthday every year and would sing to me. And I never even had the thought to call him and sing. I mean, I would call him obviously, but not to sing. Yeah. So that's great that you did that. He must have loved it.
Oh, he loved it. Dad was, if you were in Dad's phone and he knew it was your birthday, he was calling you and he was going to sing the entire happy birthday song. And that's just who he was. He loved it. And if you didn't answer, you'd get that whole message on your answering machine. I'm sure you experienced it, Peg.
Yes.
Man, he was a lot of fun. He would have a lot of laughs around that. Loved doing it. And he loved it when we called him and sang the whole song to him. He would, after we're done, he would start laughing. Then we just talk about whatever. But he was a fun guy. And so today, I just think it's such a great day to honor who he was. The day of his birth, I just think is it's a special day. It really is. And that is really why I am throwing myself out there in a big way, Peg. You know better than anybody that I'm not big on getting on stage or getting on calls, but one thing I learned from Dad is that when we have a lofty goal, something that's really big, we will step out and do whatever it takes. And that's what I'm doing. And, today I am honoring him. I'm stepping out and doing whatever it takes. I want to see this book a mega bestseller. And I don't want it for me because, I mentioned this book is not about me. It's about my father. I want this because this is a way that I've been able to honor who my father is and carry on his legacy in a really unique way, which I love because it's showing him in a light that most people did not know him. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what he was like as a father, as a family man.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And he was, I was very blessed to meet him in January of 79, not too long after you met him. I think you're about 18 at that point. Yeah. And I think I was around 19, 20. And so you're right. I mean, he was the same guy on stage as he was off stage. And I think a lot of people thought that he'd be different off stage.
Right.
But he wasn't different. It's like Raymond said in your book, or you wrote in the book that Raymond used to say, yeah, every meal is a seminar.
Right. Yeah, Raymond always had a funny perspective that way. He that's what he says. He says, yeah, if you want to know what it's like having Bob Proctor's father, well, every dinner is a seminar. He was always, teaching and it wasn't a bad thing. What it was he was doing everything he could to make sure we as his children got it. Right. That we were living it because he knew that if we got it, we'd live a better life. That's
So
what Dad was about. He wanted the best for you, but he didn't want to give it to you. You had to earn it. He wanted to make sure you did it on your own, but with the best tools that were available. And that was kind of special. So for me, this is my way of honoring him and getting that message out there.
Well, you did it brilliantly. I don't think it could have been better. It's so extraordinary, so well done. And I did see the first version of it. And it's very different than the final version. And it was interesting because when you had sent it to me, I was wondering, how much like the first version would it be like, and it was so much better. And I really love that you invested the time and the energy. And I know during that period of time, with you starting it before your father passed and then he passed and then working on it after, it was that first year after he was gone, that was a tough year for you, a really challenging time. You missed him like crazy, as, many people did, but you and him would talk every day. And you had such a bond. And so it's a big void. It is a big void. And I know he was of the mindset and would recommend that book, Dry Those Tears and et cetera, but he was still gone,
right.
And it was still a challenge for sure. We have a couple of questions, Brian, from some of our guests that are here today with us. And Tanya has a question. She said, did your father ever have a serious backlash after a real successful period? And if so, how did he get out of it? Oh, I've a bunch of ideas are coming to my mind here.
I don't understand. What do you mean by a serious backlash?
Like, let's say, it's like when somebody's, experiencing great success and all of a sudden there's just nothing or it could be a challenge, comes along.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? So Dad, over his career, had lots of ups and lots of downs. Especially in the early days. You got to think back in the 60s and 70s, even the 80s, personal development wasn't that big of a deal. And most people weren't big on it, not like what it is today. And so, he had a lot of times things didn't go that well for him. And sometimes he'd have a great success and then he'd be back in the not much was happening. Well, here's the great thing with my father. Whenever anything bad happened, he would always look for the good. He would always, the first thing he would say, it is what it is. That's what he would say. It is what it is. And he would look for the good whenever anything bad happened. And that was such a gift. One of the chapters I wrote in the book, it's called rose-colored glasses, looking through rose-colored glasses. And Dad gave me the ability to look at life through rose-colored glasses, always find the good, even when things were bad. He says, bad things are going to happen to us. They happen to all of us. We can't avoid bad things. But what we can do is we can decide how we're going to look at it and how we're going to view it and how we are going to respond or react to it. That was a great lesson from Dad. So, no matter what was happening, good, bad, I've had a lot of bad things happen in my life, but I always, because of Dad, looked for the good in it. I looked through rose-colored glasses. What, out of this bad thing, what good can there be? And there's always something good. And that was always his reaction whenever anything bad happened. He says, well, something good's going to come along because of this. And then he would just carry on. He never let it take him down. That was... I've had so many, can I say that was the best lesson I've ever learned? Maybe not the best, but probably one of the most important. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. As you're saying that, I think about the day I had gone to the doctor 2 years ago in July. It was around this time. In fact, it was today. I went on July the 5th and I met with this doctor at this private clinic because I was getting this lump checked out of my neck. And he said, assume it's cancer until it's proven otherwise. And that was just a shock to me. First of all, I was shocked that a doctor would say that and say it so abruptly and, talk about bedside manner. I don't think there was any of that there. And I came home and it was the middle of the afternoon and I decided I'm going to have a private pity party. So I crawled into bed and I just crawled into bed and my phone rang and I look at my phone and it says Bob Proctor. And I'm thinking, how does he know? Like that was another thing that he was absolutely gifted with, was intuitive power, totally tuned in, tapped in. So I answered the phone and at that point we were calling each other Savvy and Sophie, from Savvy. So he goes, how's Sophie doing today? And I started to cry. And he's like, what the hell's going on? I mean, he was having none of it, right? And I mean, he would just sort of scare you, awake. So I told him what happened. He goes, where are you right now? I said, I'm in bed. He goes, get out of bed right now. Get into your office. And he's just like commanding me, like, take a pen and a paper and write this down right now. And he gave me an affirmation. And, that was something else about your dad, which I felt was such a gift. He wouldn't let you have a private pity party, not for 2 seconds, all right? You're not going to go there, or if you've already gone there, don't stay there, right? Like get your head out of there as fast as humanly possible, because he was so congruent with his message. And I suppose that's why he was like that with you, with his kids.
Right. I mean, he lived that. Whenever anything bad happened to him, he didn't wallow in it, because here's a simple thing. He always says, we become what we think about. So if we're going to let a bad thing control our thoughts, more of that bad thing's going to happen. If we take and look for the good in it, the good will happen for us. And it's, where are you putting your thoughts? What are you directing your energy to? And he knew deeply what that meant. Right. So, and he taught me that. I know he taught my sister that, my brother that, anybody close to him. He said, you cannot wallow in the bad stuff, because it will only bring more of that to you. So, look for the good, look for that shining whatever within whatever's going on, and go after that, follow that. And right. if it's as simple as writing out, like he did for you, writing out an affirmation and saying it to yourself every day until you believe it, that's what you got to do. Whatever it takes to stay focused on the positive. And he lived that, that, Peg. I mean, he lived that. That was who he was. What you saw from him on stage is who he was also in person. He was actually, and you'll see it in the book, he was actually even more loving in person than what you saw on the stage. He was such a giving, generous, kind man. And you'll read that in the book. You really will.
Oh, so true. He also had such a great sense of humor. And when you quoted, you become what you think about, it reminded me of the time, and this was early days. So this was, probably back in the 1980s when I was going to his seminars. And I remember him saying that you become what you think about. So you need to pay attention to what you're thinking about. And he said that there was a 17-year-old boy that was in his seminars one time and said, does that mean I'm going to become a girl? Because as a 17-year-old, that's all he's thinking about are girls. And your dad shared that. And it was just another great way of his great sense of humor coming through.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you know, at the Matrix events, I would always find a funny story to tell. I'd find a funny joke, and then I'd make it about Bob. Right. And it was a challenge, to find clean, non-offensive jokes. But Denny was always on the job to find the perfect joke. And I would start speaking on stage, and he would be leaving. He'd probably be leaving the seminar at that point, maybe going to have another meeting or whatever. And he would pause. And he'd turn around, and you could see that look on his face, like, don't mess with me.
Yeah. He had to hang around and see what it is you were going to come out with. That's for sure. He had a great sense of humor that way. It was really
he did.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. And like when he would hug us, when we were going on stage and he'd hug you, you get on stage and, he'd be handing it over to you. He'd whisper in your ear, now don't F it up. A lot of people didn't know that either. And of course you start laughing, but he's saying it as a joke, and he, does it to change your state, especially if you're nervous or whatever. I remember at the dinner that we had just before the celebration of his life in Toronto, and Blaine Bartlett and I were sitting across from each other at the dinner. And we were talking about that. I was talking about that. And Blaine said, he used to say that to me too, don't mess it up. Only he didn't say mess. Okay. We have a couple more questions here, Brian. Another one from Pemba, the artist. And she said, when Bob first started out in self-development, what did his daily routine look like?
Well, I can't speak exactly to what that is. I can only speak to what his daily routine was like more towards the end, because that's when I was old enough to really capture what he was doing. I think when I was young, I didn't really know, but I would venture to say it's very similar to what he was doing towards the end of his life too. Dad would always start his day off with gratitude. He'd always write out what he was grateful for. And I know that's easy to say and it's simple and we all talk about it, but do we actually practice it? And he would always write out what he was grateful for. And what I loved, he would also write out what he was grateful for, even if it hadn't happened yet. He was allowing it to come into his life. So that was one of the first things. The other thing is he would study. He studied every day, even if it was only for 10 minutes, he studied every day. I had the gift when I was up in Toronto for little Brian's wedding. I was doing a webinar for a fellow over in Denmark. And I said to Linda, my dad's wife, I said to her, I said, hey, Linda, can I get Dad's book, the Think and Grow Rich book, and just hold it while I'm doing this webinar? And she said, sure, of course. And so she went and got it. And I was holding the book and just holding it. My God, the emotions that it brought out of me was incredible. And if you know my father at all, this book, Think and Grow Rich, was given to him back in 1961. He studied that book every single day. And that book became a little tattered and people wanted to get him a new one. They wanted to get the book he had rebound. He wouldn't have anything to do with it because this was the book he studied every day and he wanted it the way it was. Well, when I held this thing, if you don't know, the book at the now is held together by a big rubber band. And I take off the rubber band and I open it up and it would fall apart. I mean, it is that well worn. Well, it's that well worn because he studied it every single day. That was part of his morning routine. What if you were to study something every single day on any subject, you're going to become an expert on that subject. And that's what he taught. And that is what he did. He lived what he taught. So those are the two big things that were part of his morning routine. And he did that without fail. He would also write out his goal. He had a very big goal that he was shooting for, and he would always write out the goal every day as well. And it's just enforcing it in the brain. And it's starting your day in a positive way so that the rest of your day will just unfold in the goodness that it can become.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. And I always carried a goal card. I mean, as long as I knew him, he always had a goal card on him. And he would say, I don't always take it out and read it. I can just touch my pocket and I connect with it because I know what it says, what's on that goal card. Yeah. So that was a great one. Okay, guys, a little commercial. If you haven't picked up your copy of My Father Knew the Secret, make sure that you get a copy today. You can get it from, there's a link that Roddy will put right in the chat box. So you can use that link and go over to Brian's site. He is giving away some wonderful bonus gifts as well when you get your copy today. So you're going to be rewarded, but more so, you're going to be rewarded with an incredible book, absolutely extraordinary. And in fact, while you're over there, get another copy and give it to somebody that you really care about. Or if you've already bought a copy, buy another copy and give it to somebody that you care about, because the people are definitely going to benefit from reading it.
Well,
okay.
You know what, Peg, I was going to thank you for saying that. I was just going to ask if you've already got a copy and it's a great book. I know I wrote it, but I can say it because it's really about my father and it's about the lessons. So I would ask you, if you can today, go and buy another copy or a couple of copies for other people that you think will benefit from this. Because today's the day I really want it to rank up. I want it to do extremely well. And every little bit helps. So whatever you can do to help that, I appreciate. And I know it'll make a great gift for somebody else.
That's so great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We have a question from Sozo. Is it possible to share the affirmation Bob gave you? A lot of us are facing a lot out there. I was just looking to see if I know I have it written down here. I did write about it in Savvy Wisdom too, because this version of the book is where Sophie goes through the experience and Savvy guides her throughout, but it was something along the line, I'm so happy and so grateful that every cell of my body is vibrating in perfect harmony with everything that I desire. I'm 100% healthy. It was something along those lines. And that probably sounds like it, right, Brian? Your
sounds
father.
like it. Yeah, it definitely does. Hey, can I jump in, Peg? I see a question here that Rupesh has asked a couple of times. And it's a great one. I'd like to answer. It says, hey, Brian, what was that pivotal point, that one decision that completely transformed your father's life in this direction? So there'd be lots of those, but that's a great question. Here's the thing that worked for Dad. And it's not one thing. It was his way of being. You know, Dad always talked about the law of attraction, and we will attract to us whatever we give energy to. A pivotal moment in Dad's career did not happen until he was 72 years old. Mm-hmm. That is when The Secret came out. You know, Dad was always a big deal before The Secret, but when The Secret came out, it elevated him to a whole nother level. After that, you know, he was on Larry King a couple of times. He was on Ellen DeGeneres. His career took off in such a way, and he was 72 years old. And I'll tell you what, what caused that pivotal moment. And that was the fact that he was always open to the good in his life. And he always knew that something big was going to happen. He didn't know when, but he always knew it. To this point, I'll tell a little bit of that story. It's actually in a chapter of the book. When he got into that movie, a message was left on his phone from somebody in Australia. It was a little bit garbled. He couldn't get it. And so he asked Gina, if Gina was my dad's assistant, if she could dig into his voicemail and maybe find out who this person was and see what it was. Well, Gina called and found out that, and this was probably a month after this message was left. So there was like no time left to it. Anyways, Gina called, and it was Rhonda Byrne's sister, Glenda, I believe is her name. And they were filming this movie, The Secret, in Aspen, Colorado, the following weekend. And they wanted Dad to be in it, but you know, now it's kind of close to the time that probably wouldn't be able to work. Well, as crazy as this is, Dad was going to be doing a seminar in Aspen, Colorado, that very same weekend, literally across the street from where they were filming the movie. So Dad said, sure, you know, I'll go across the street and we'll film for an hour and, you know, be done with it. At that point, nobody had any idea what this movie was going to do. And Dad had only ever been in Aspen, Colorado one other time. So it's not a place that he frequented. And you talk about the law of attraction, the fact that he was there that weekend, there's something to that. And the reason why that happened is that he truly believed that if he was open and he knew something big was going to happen, it was going to happen. But beyond that, he always had to act on whatever came his way. Whatever came his way, he was open for it and he would take part in. You know, so many times we think it's got to land in our lap. Well, it might land in our lap, but it won't happen unless we take action towards it as well. And the fact that he was willing to go and record for this, he never got paid to be in that movie. They weren't paying people to be in it. So it had to just be a gift from his heart. And he was willing to do whatever it took to help that situation, help Rhonda Byrne with her movie, to be a part of it so that he could spread the message of what that was about. And to him, the importance was spreading that message. Because he did that and did it so freely, I can clearly say he, in my opinion, he was the number one person in that movie. He was one they featured predominantly, and he wasn't even going to be in the movie. It just happened that he was there that one weekend. That was a pivotal point in Dad's life, that because that movie came out and became such a phenomenon, his career took off in an extreme way. But it was because he was open for it. And the big thing, he expected it. He expected that was going to come into his life. And that's it. You know, his license plate on his car before he passed away, he was able to get it, his license plate was expect. He just he knew you expect what it is that you want in your life. You have to innately know it. And that's how Dad lived. And that's what he taught us. And I know he taught you that, Peggy. You're probably one of the best people I've ever seen in that area of life. And look at you now. You had this cancer, you're cancer free. You said that affirmation every day. You did not let it overpower you. And you know, you're a great example of living this material.
Yeah, you know, it's Bob also taught me, and this is one of the most valuable lessons, not the most valuable lesson, But one of the most valuable lessons is that no amount of going to these seminars or reading the books or listening to the audios or watching the videos is going to do anything unless and until you understand and apply. So I was all about the application, and I wasn't afraid to ask the questions. I remember one time your dad said, if you're asking the question, you're demonstrating your ignorance. And I was like, I'm fine with demonstrating my ignorance because I want to know. And he loved that too. He totally respected that as well. You know, when you talk about your dad being willing to be in that movie and thinking about, he was 72 years of age. He never gave up, like never, ever gave up. I mean, this he was completely 100% committed to. And I think about the time that I was launching one of my books, I forget what number it was, 7 or something like that. And I was doing a big launch party here in Ottawa, and I booked a ballroom that held 1,100 people. Do you remember this?
You remember that? Yes.
Yeah, it was for a book that I wrote called The One Thing. And I had secured a comedian to come and entertain, and a hypnotist and a singer, and it was going to be a whole big event. And I thought what would really top it off is to have Bob Proctor there speaking, you know, as my keynote. And so what I did was I had read the book that you guys put together, your family put together, Brian, called Inspiration. Remember that book, all the stories of your family members that had been inspired. And one of the stories in that book was about how your dad used to love having butter tarts and tea with his mother, Marguerite.
Yes.
And butter tarts, I understand, are more of a Canadian thing than an international thing. And so I actually had an invitation created. I had a designer do it up and had it printed. It was a beautiful invitation for the book launch. And I had your dad's name on the invitation. Now, I hadn't released these. It was one invitation that I had made, and I went to a bakery, bought butter tarts, got some tea, some china mugs, and I couriered it to your dad. And I said in the card, you know, this is designed to butter you up. Like, I want you to come and speak at my event. Well, when Bob got the package, he saw this invitation to this event, and his name was on it. So he looked at it and he thought, I guess I have to go, right? Like, I guess I have to go because she's already announced this thing. So he agreed to come, but I had not announced it. I didn't tell anybody about it. But anyways, it got him to go. And I was grateful for that because we filled the ballroom. You know, one of the stories that you shared, all kinds of stories are coming to me from your book, My Father Knew the Secret. One of the stories that you shared was about getting your Austin Healey. Mm-hmm. And this was something that you had on your vision board for quite some time. But I want you to share that story, if you would, and talk about, you know, calling your father after you had left the store, the showroom where you saw the car.
Sure. Well, you know, what I talk about in the book is creating a vision board for yourself. I know some of you probably have vision boards. Others think that's not a bad idea, but you haven't done it. Others think maybe it's kind of a crazy idea. I love vision boards. It's just it's a creative way to put something in front of you, you know, to really address your desires. A vision board is not specifically one goal, but it's different things that you want in your life. And so I had created a vision board that had several pictures. I had pictures of cars, boats, custom home on the water, which I am now living in. You know, mortgage burning, that, you know, I had no mortgage. I had one of a picture of just the guy's abs that were like, you know, like a 6-pack. I'm not quite there yet. But,
okay, let's see.
But, you know, I had images of things that I wanted in my life. And I put all of these things on a board, and I framed it in a nice frame. I didn't have just a poster board to stick up on the wall. I put it in a nice frame, and I put it in my bedroom. So that I'd see it every morning when I woke up and every night when I went to bed. And one of the things on that vision board was an Austin Healey, Austin Healey 3000. I don't know why. I always loved the Austin Healey's. It's an old English cool car that, you know, convertible. I had never sat in one. I had seen a few at different car shows. They were just, to me, a cool looking car. They sounded great. And so it was on my vision board. So it wasn't a major goal, but it was something that I wanted as part of my life. Well, Dad was being honored at Carnegie Hall in New York City back in 2016. And I was I thought, man, I got to go to that. And I thought, I'm going to go in a day or two early. I like New York City to wander around. It's not a place I could live. It's a little too crazy, but it's a cool place to visit. That's, for me anyway. And so I thought I'm going to go in a couple of days early. And there was a website that I always followed, Cooper Classic Cars, based out of New York in Greenwich Village. And they always had really cool cars on their website that were for sale. They're always concourse quality, like the day they roll off the line. Porsches, Ferraris, Austin Healey's, like really Jaguars. So I thought, I'm there early. I'm going to take a wander down and check out this place. So I went down and found it, and the lights were all off. It was a showroom. I couldn't really see in there real well. And it was a Saturday. And I'm thinking, that's kind of weird that it's closed. So anyways, there was a little intercom button. So I pressed the intercom buzzer, and a fella answered, and he said, well, this is by an appointment only place. We're not open to the public. And so I just replied, oh, okay. I said, well, I'm here out of town and I've walked down here. I'd really like to see what you have. And he said, well, we don't normally do that. And I said, well, I'm here right now. So, I'd love to see what you have. And the fellow said, okay. And he was nice enough about it. And he says, I'll come down and I'll let you in. So I had to stand there for, 5-10 minutes. And he came down, they hit the lights, and he opened the door, and I was able to walk in. Well, there were some really cool cars there, but there was an Austin Healey against the wall that was exactly like I had on my vision board. And it was like, ooh, it kind of turned my crank. It was exactly what I had on my vision board. It's something I really wanted. And so that was the first time I ever got to sit in one. I sat in that car, and I had them take pictures of me in the car. Anyways, it was really, really cool. And it is concourse quality. I mean, you could eat off the motor. It is like it's brand new. Well, it's a 1962 model. And it's white with black coves, just a gorgeous car. And it's just, like I said, just what I had on my vision board. Well, it came to the price, and it was like, whew, it was a lot of money for a car that I'm not going to drive very often. And I think I acted cool. I didn't want to make it look like it was a shock, like, hey, I can't afford that, or anything crazy like that. And so I just said to him, I said, well, let me think about it, and I'll get back to you. I think it was just before I was about to start doing renovations on the house in Florida when I owned that home. So I had a lot of money committed to a lot of other things. So the last thing I needed to do was buy a crazy overpriced car. But I took pictures of it, and I left. And as I'm walking back to the hotel, I'm thinking to myself, I'm about to turn 55 years old. And as I say, it was back in 2016. Well, for me, 55, as crazy as it is, has always been my favorite number. I just love the sound of it, 55. I like the way it looks. When I was a kid, all my sports jersey, I always had the number 55 put on because it just sounded great. And I thought, God, I want to do something special for my 55th birthday. And if I'm to be honest, I didn't have a lot going on in my life at that time. I wasn't in a relationship right then. There was somebody I wanted to be in a relationship with, who I am now married to, so it worked out. But I had nothing happening, and I wanted something special for my birthday. Anyways, I called my father. And if you want to do something that puts you out of your comfort zone, you give him a call. If you don't want to do it, don't call him, because he's gonna help push you. So I called Dad, and I sent him pictures of the car. And I was telling him about it. And if you know my dad, he's not into cars. So, the easy thing for him to say would have been like, what the heck would you want to do that for? That's stupid. He didn't project his thoughts on me. That was a great lesson. He always just encouraged, what drives you? That's all that matters. And so he said, he asked me questions about it. And then I said the one statement that put both of us over the line. And I said to him, I said, you know what, Dad? I said, this would be kind of a cool thing to buy for myself as a gift to me on my 55th birthday. Well, that's all I had to say. And he said, Brian, then you got to turn around and do this. And he encouraged me. He says, you'll find a way to make it happen. I said to him, well, I got money I got to spend on the house. I've got to do other things. And he says, those are all reasons why you can't. And he says to me, focus on the reasons why you can. If you want this, you'll find a way. Turn around and do it. He says, you don't even need to know how you're going to do it right now. it will come if you just step out and make a decision. That was always his thing, make a decision. So in that instant, I made a decision. I called the guy up and said, I'm coming back. Let's talk about it. And he got the owner of the car on the phone, who owned this company that sold the cars. He was just somebody that worked there. And he got the fellow on the phone, and I talked him down a little bit. I still wasn't real comfortable with the number, but I did it. I bought the car, and I went up and I was, going over everything with the guy, signing all the paperwork. And my heart was like beating, because it was a lot of money. I really stretched for this thing. And I left feeling good, but scared, which is a normal thing. If you're going after something big, if you're not feeling a little bit afraid, probably not big enough. And this wasn't even a major goal for me. It was just something I really wanted. But anyways, I did it. I made a decision. And as I'm walking back to the hotel, I thought, God, I just like something to look at about the car. So I called the guy up again. I said, can you email me the British Heritage certificate of the car, just so I can kind of look at it? Because it's, everything, it's all documented. It was like concourse quality, voted on, all kinds of crazy things about this car. So he said, sure, I'll email it to you. You'll have it before you get there. Well, I get back to the hotel room and I open up this email, and I mean, every hair in my body stood up when I looked at this. So the car is a 1962 model. I was born December 8th, 1961. When I looked at this certificate, the car started to be built on December 8th, 1961, the actual day of my birth. And I'm buying this car as a birthday gift for myself. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So you want to talk about the law of attraction and being open to receiving. I mean, I don't even know how you speak to it, but it's such a great example of that. And the fact that I was open to it, and I stepped out and did something that was uncomfortable, but for something that I wanted. And that was kind of a cool reward around that. That I'll never look at that car the same way because of that.
That is such a great story. I love it. And I love that you did call him, because you know what's going to happen when you call him. You're getting a seminar. Do you want it? That's all you have to ask yourself. Do you want it? It's neither big nor small. Only thinking makes it so. I can hear his voice in my head right now. It's so many great things. Okay, we have 3 more questions that we've got 8 minutes. So I think we'll probably have time for these 3 questions. Stephanie is on the line, and she says, what favorite lesson from your father did you make sure you taught your children and now your grandchildren?
Favorite lesson. That's a good one. I would say there's 2. Probably favorite lesson is what I said in the beginning, that MMFI story that make me feel important, leaving everybody with an impression of increase. I certainly taught that to my kids. Peggy, both Leanne and Danny. I think my kids are a very good example of that. They also leave everybody with the impression of increase. That's just such a powerful way to live. So they live that, which is great. The other thing is all around building self-image. I know there's not a lot of time, so I'll tell the story quickly. When I was young, and I think back to my earliest memories of Dad, I think back to the times that he used to tuck me into bed, when I was a little kid. And I can remember Dad, he always sat on the edge of the bed. I'd be laying down, ready to go to sleep. And he always put his hand on my chest. He always said it's important to have a physical connection when you're trying to relay good thoughts, good images, good things. So he always did that. And he would start to relay to me all the good things that were happening that day for me. And if something bad happened, he would talk about that, but then he would turn it into what good came from that, or what to look for good out of that. And then he would end it like this. He would say, Brian, you are capable of having, doing, or being anything you want in this life, anything. And he said, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have a great sleep. When you wake up in the morning, you're going to wake up with a big smile on your face, feeling wonderful. And that's what he did to me every night when he tucked me into bed. Well, there's a lesson in that. He was building a strong self-image within me, and he taught me to look at things in a good way. So I started doing that with my children. when they were born. And I did something very similar. I made them superheroes and stories. I did things that built their self-image. And that's what I did to my kids every night. And, I never had any trouble with my kids through teenage years or anything. They've always been great, and they're well balanced, and they both have a great self-image. That's important. And now my daughter, she has 2 kids. I have 2 grandchildren, and I see the way my daughter and her husband, who is just incredible, how they treat my grandchildren, and they're doing the same thing with their kids. And it's so wonderful. So that would be another big thing I learned, just to impress from as early an age as possible what a great person, you're with, who's in front of you, whatever. Build self-image, build up great self-image. I don't think we have enough of that in this world. So that's
yeah. Incredibly valuable. I love it. And I'm certain Nora and Jake are definitely experiencing the positive ripple effect of that as well. All right, let's go to Sue Steele. She says, did Bob ever use hypnosis to change his subconscious thinking?
Oh, always. He called self-hypnosis. Meditations is just really another form of hypnosis. I remember even when Dad learned hypnosis a long time ago. I remember being in Chicago, and he was practicing these things, and he would hypnotize me as a kid, and he'd have me take a bite of a lemon thinking it was chocolate. I mean, he was doing all that stuff. So he definitely studied what hypnosis was all about. And he really studied that whole self-hypnosis and the going into a meditation state. That really is just a form of self-hypnosis. So yes, he was very big on that. It's all about image building in your head. That's all hypnosis really is building images in your head, so that you impress through your whole body. So yes, he was into that.
That's so good. All right. Matt has a question. Matt says, was there ever a transparent moment with him where he shared a vulnerable moment of doubt or regret? Did you ever see him at a low point?
I can't say I never saw him at a low point. For sure, I would see him at low points. Here's the deal with that. I can't think of an instance because there was nothing that kept him down. He had moments in time where things didn't go right, where things weren't good. Here's the deal with that. He never let them control him. So he never wallowed in it. So to actually think of a moment in time, I really can't. I know he had those times, but Dad was a master at saying switch in his head and to start focusing on the good. And it is what it is. So, it's probably a gift that I can't think of a specific time, because it shows me that he truly was what he taught. He didn't allow himself to wallow in anything. He just looked for the good and just carried on, did the best he could.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I saw Matt's question, I was thinking the same thing. I do not remember a time where he went down. I mean, he may have had challenging experiences, like Jay Rang's on the line right now, and she had said, I'd love for Brian to tell the story of Bob's heart surgery, and that was part of it. Like he was on stage and he was speaking, and all of a sudden he wasn't feeling good. There was a doctor in the audience, and next thing you know, he's on a table getting a heart valve replacement done, and he really developed that philosophy. Michael Beckwith had said, it is what it is. Harvest the good, forgive the rest.
Right. Yeah, and he lived that way. So that's a great thing. He truly lived by example. And I write about that in the book. I really do. You're going to get such a great, I think, perspective. I know some of you have got the book already and are starting to read it. You're just going to get a great perspective of who he was, because this book actually shows who he was off the stage. And you will see that he lived what he taught. He truly did.
And who he was off the stage was the same man that was on the stage as well. Yes. I think a lot of people thought it was actually different. So make sure you get your copy of My Father Knew the Secret. Okay, one last question snuck in. We've got less than 60 seconds. Bob always mentioned that he loved you and that you're so close, which is incredible. How did Bob handle his divorce at the early stages?
So I was 14 years old when my mother and my father divorced. So probably a pretty impressionable age. Dad was just, and I look back on it and it's like my mother and father were so different that I understand why they got divorced. So that's okay. It is what it is. That's Dad always focused on the positive, even during that time. Here's the big deal. And I do write about it. I don't know as I write about it in regards to the divorce, but Dad was always present. He was always there in the moment with all of us kids. I remember road trips with him, and he was always in the moment. He was there with you all the time. And so I never had any funky feelings around it. Yes, in the beginning, we lived with my mom for the first little while, so Dad would visit on weekends. And then we ended up living with Dad for quite a while. It was never complicated. The one thing that both, well, especially Dad, but they never put on myself or my brother and sister about the divorce. Didn't talk bad about the other. Didn't do that kind of thing. Dad always just I don't know. He was just there. There was no bad out of it. There was no negative out of it. He always took the good. He was present with us when he was with us. He did all kinds of things to always let us know how we felt. The one great thing I can say is right up till the end of his life, Dad left. He knew he was going. So I know how lucky I was. We got to say anything and everything we wanted to say each other. But the one special thing with Dad, and it didn't happen just at the end, it happened all through my life. I never doubted how he loved me. He was always letting me know how much he cared for me in a really deep way. And that was a gift that I will always have in my heart. And some of the things that he said at the very end of life, which only Corey knows, I can't even, it's just, he knew how to reach into your heart and touch you in a positive way. And boy, if we can all act like that and treat those around us in a loving way and show them what we feel, we're going to live a better life. And those around you are going to have a better life. They'll know how you feel. I don't think we tell people that we love often enough how much we love them. Dad always made a joke. He says, sometimes we treat those closest to us worse than we treat a stranger. And you don't want to live that way. Make sure that we treat those closest to us better than we'd ever treat any stranger.
That's beautiful, beautiful advice. And I love the story about when he kissed you on the lips.
I mentioned this at when we interned him. I told it was just such a moment. And this one I can share because I even think I talk about it in the book. I was in the intensive care and I'd been there with him for hours on hours, and it was probably 11 at night. I was tired, but I just didn't want to leave his side, but he was sleeping mostly. And he just said to me, Brian, go home and get some rest. You come back tomorrow morning, but you just go home and get some rest. And I said, okay. And he says, come here. And, at that time, especially in the ICU, you got masks on, you got all kinds of nonsense going on. And I had a mask and a shield. I mean, I had gloves on my hands. I mean, they had us rigged up. It was really kind of crazy. So he says, lift the mask up, or lift the shield up. So I lifted the shield up, and he goes, here, I want to tell you something. And he leaned in, and then he pulled my mask down and he gave me a kiss right on the lips. And it was just, it was just such a moment of love. And that was just his way of really making me know, yeah, it was good.
He was an incredible man.
He was.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your dad with all of us. My father knew the secret. I hope all of you have ordered an extra copy today. As Brian said, his goal is to rise it up the charts to honor his father. And I know that this is a gift that you give to someone that would be something that they cherish forever. So and if you have kids, get copies for your kids. And parents, siblings, anyone that you know, get a copy. Start your early Christmas shopping now. Get a dozen copies, but definitely get yourself extra copies today. Roddy had very kindly placed the link in the chat box on the right-hand side. So thank you so much, Brian. We kept you a little bit over time. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and to share from your heart, not only in the book, but with everything that you're doing. What's next for you?
You know, I keep getting asked that question. You know, first off, thank you, Peggy, for having me on. What is next for me? I don't know yet. I don't have a big plan in the scheme of things. I am so focused on this book selling a crazy hundreds of thousands of copies. I see myself at #1 in all books worldwide on Amazon. My whole focus is right now is to get this book into as many hands as possible. And that's it. You know, Dad always said, somebody that's super focused on something, you're going to achieve it. Right now, that is my focus. It's not on what's next, because this hasn't happened yet, but it is happening now. I can feel it. I can feel the energy around it. So that's all I'm focused on right now, Peg. Something good will unfold, and there will be more good that will come down the road. What that is exactly, I don't know yet.
It's the Peg and Bry show.
The Peg and Bry show, that's right.
Tanya wrote in the chat box, she said, come on over to Holland and Germany with Peggy. That's what we said. Come on. We're going to be in Ireland, by the way. We're both going to be at the Inception event, which Kim Calvert is hosting in August in Ireland. We're both going to be there speaking. And this morning earlier, I sent a text to Brian and I said, somebody had said that we need to take the Peg and Bry show, or the Brian Peg show, to Netflix. And he said he'd binge watch it. So I'm all for that. That would be a lot of fun, but I really appreciate you. Really appreciate everyone taking the time out of your day to come and be here with us and to celebrate not only Bob Proctor, and as it is his birthday today, but Brian Proctor and the release of My Father Knew the Secret. So thank you, everyone. If you want to watch this again, we'll make it available as well. So really appreciate you. Let's give Brian a big warm round of applause. Thank you so much, Brian. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Peggy. And thank you, everybody, being here. But your smiling faces have made this a lot of fun. So I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
All right. Have a good day.